Let's now talk about Netanyahu and Israel, because I think this is a really important story. And, of course, Netanyahu is facing a very delicate balancing act because, of course, and this is why US politics is so important, because Biden is stepping down. That changes the dynamic with regards to Israel, with regards to Ukraine, with regards to foreign policy generally, and the relationship with this country as well. Joining me now is Paul Harris, who's editor of the Jewish Telegraph. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
This is interesting because Benjamin Netanyahu is visiting the US this week. Of course, massive pressure on him to end the Gaza war, not just from Israelis, but also from the US administration as well. The understanding is he is still due to meet Joe Biden if he's well enough from his COVID-19 isolation. And many people are saying this is really an opportunity to reset relationships with Washington. We've had huge tensions over his approach to the war. And, of course, now it's been overshadowed by the fact that actually Biden is stepping down. You've got Kamala Harris coming in as the Democratic nominee. And then you've got President Trump. What's your reading of that?
Well, as far as Netanyahu is concerned, he has had quite an uneasy relationship with Biden, as he did with Obama. But with Trump, obviously, Israelis are rather fond of the man because he moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which is what British Jews all over the world and Israelis wanted for some time. This was a major, major move. So I'm presuming that Netanyahu is very much hoping that Trump is going to be the next president of the USA. I would imagine that any talks between Biden and Netanyahu are going to be uncomfortable. Biden, as he has done in the past and has done other world leaders, tried to dictate to Israel in which direction they should be going. But Israel is not for turning. Israel, and particularly Netanyahu, will do what Netanyahu wants to do, what he feels is best for Israel.
And, of course, yesterday the Israeli military ordered civilians to evacuate from part of the designated humanitarian zone in southern Gaza ahead of what it called the forceful operation against Palestinian fighters. We saw massive sort of scenes there. We saw Israeli strikes near Khan Yunis. 37 people had been killed, 120 people injured. Just in terms of his popularity at home, I was reading many people saying, look, this man doesn't actually represent Israel. He's lost the trust of Israelis. It's sending the wrong signal to Israelis and the wrong signal to Netanyahu that he's going to address Congress. What's your response to that?
You're asking whether Netanyahu is the right person.
Well, I'm actually asking, is it the right thing that he's going to Congress to address Congress and the United States when actually people in Israel are saying you need to concentrate on getting out those hostages and making sure that this war ends and that a deal is on the table?
I think it's very important that if the Prime Minister of Israel is invited to address Congress, that he does so. He will get his point over to a world audience, whether people agree or disagree with him. What we saw happening in Gaza yesterday is just another example of the cynicism of Hamas embedding itself in a humanitarian area, a zone which had been cleared, a zone which was supposed to be safe for Palestinians to be living in while Israel carried out its operations in other parts of Gaza. Yet again, Hamas have embedded themselves in an area where there are civilians, quite cynically, knowing that Israel will try to hit or will hit those areas. And this is exactly what Israel has done. And I'm presuming that Netanyahu will bring this message to Congress that as long as Hamas embeds itself, as long as Hamas is operating within Gaza, as long as Hamas is a threat to Israel, Israel will continue to carry out operations to eliminate the terrorist organization.
And in terms of a potential deal, it is believed that a deal may well be soon on the table. But of course, we've got Netanyahu rejecting the idea of a separate Palestinian state, as far as I'm aware, even up to now.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard reports, and Netanyahu has made these comments. I think possibly this is being misinterpreted to some extent. I think that at this time, Netanyahu would not consider a separate Palestinian state, not while Hamas are operating and while there are Hamas operatives still active in Gaza. Long term, obviously, everybody wants to see a viable Palestinian state alongside a secure Israel. But while there is Hamas in one place in Gaza and Fatah in the West Bank, and the two hate each other as much as they hate Israel, this is not going to happen. And I'm presuming that, while there is this instability in the Middle East with the Houthis, with Iran controlling matters, I don't see that anything will change, and I don't see that there will be a message other than that, which that Netanyahu is actually suggesting that there cannot be a Palestinian state at the moment. But obviously Netanyahu's days are limited as prime minister. It's very unlikely he's going to have another term. So we will see a change of administration in Israel, and there could be quite an alteration in policy when that happens.
Many people are saying he's kind of slow rolling the process. You talked about the relationship being reset if Trump wins. What happens if Harris wins?
Well, that's going to be another matter altogether, because the relationship will not be the same. If we believe the polls, then Trump is going to win, but not necessarily polls are going to be as accurate as we...
I mean, we say that, but of course the front page of the Times this morning just saying that donor dollars are pouring in. I mean, the amount of money she's now raising, I think the Democrats are feeling far more confident than they were, and maybe this competition changes. So what happens if Harris gets in? What does that do for Netanyahu?
It means that he may have to listen more to what the United States says, more so than he has been under Biden, and more than he has listened to other leaders. This could change the dynamic tremendously, particularly in terms of aid with weapons and financial aid in other areas too. This could change things really, really dramatically. And again, it depends whether and when there is an election in Israel and who is the leader at the time.
And of course, we've talked about this a great deal this morning, the fact that Harris is from a different generation, she's much younger. Clearly, I think there's a belief that actually she would restrict weapons on munition sales as well, the munitions to be used in Gaza, for example. So she would be much tougher, I think.
She'll be much tougher. She has a background which is quite interesting, because her husband is Jewish and possibly himself understands the situation in Israel, the psyche of it, the emotion of Israel as far as Jewish people are concerned. Whether that comes into play, I don't know. But it is going to be a tough call for Netanyahu and whichever other leader comes after Netanyahu. If Harris becomes the president of the United States, it's going to be very, very different.
How is the contest being perceived in Israel?
I think Israelis are watching from afar. Israelis are very keen on American politics. The Israeli press does tend to focus quite a bit on Israeli politics. And I feel that a lot of Israelis, obviously, many, possibly even the majority, are very disenchanted with Netanyahu's leadership, particularly regarding the hostages. This situation is tragic. Just only yesterday, hearing that 2 more have died. While the hostage situation continues, while it prevails, while the hostages are still being held, there is no prospect of a settlement between Israel and the Palestinians, or I should say, with Hamas. There is no way that Netanyahu will reach an agreement without an absolute concrete agreement that the hostages are all released. And this is something that Israelis are desperate for. All over Israel, we have posters, we have demonstrations demanding that the hostages are released. There are vigils. It is very, very much part of Israelis' day-to-day life. You can't miss what is going on there. At the airport, as you arrive, at the airport, as you leave, there are really heart-rending posters with football scarves, children's toys, all sorts of things that continue to remind not only Israelis but visitors to Israel what is happening still in Gaza.
Paul, thank you for your time this morning. That's Paul Harris, the editor of the Jewish Telegraph.